John Fraser and Rowan Cole, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thanks so much, Greg.
Yeah, thanks, Greg.
You've got this fabulous album coming out on March 21 under the name of Faces in the Street, folk-based music. Who were the artists that influenced you and led you down this path of folk music?
Oh, where do we start?
Yeah, I was going to say, where do we start? Do you want to start?
Well, there's a whole lot of artists that have influenced us. Not all of whom are, folk related. So there's definitely a strain of rock music that's influenced us along the way. We're playing acoustic music, so we're, presenting ourselves as folk as such. But I suppose Neil Young would be an obvious influence in the acoustic space there. I just remember when I heard Mike Oldfield's album Tubular Bells, and it had mandolin on it, I thought, I love that. And I went out and bought a mandolin.
Okay.
And so I've been dabbling on the mandolin ever since, sort of thing. So that's an influence for me. You probably got a few things to say about.
Yeah, I guess there's musical influences and there's songwriting influences. And, I came from a family where everyone played and everyone played really well. And then there was me.
Right.
And I kind of started thinking, as you do in a big family, well, where's my ecological niche? And the answer was songwriting. And one great thing about my parents was that I kind of had this habit of making up little snatches of melody and singing them on the spot. And sometimes I do that all the time when we were in the car on a long trip, and I was never told to pipe down or shut up or stop doing it, which I realise now was, quite a privilege actually. And as far as songwriting influences, like for me later on, it would have been acts like Red Gum, like Eric Bogle. When I was in my teens, I was more into kind of fairly hard rock. And then when Rowan and I started jamming at school, Rowan said, well, I like Neil Young. And I said, who's Neil Young? I guess the other big influence for me would be the kind of folk rock bands, like the Byrds would be an example. I still remember the first time I heard 8 Miles High, and it just blew me away.
Yeah. So is the message that some of these artists project, is that as important to you as the music?
I definitely say yes. I pay a lot of attention to lyrics, and if I don't like a lyric, it's hard for me to like the song.
Right.
There's one or two songs with lyrics I don't like where I really do like the song, but not that many. I think that was what drew me from rock towards more folk, or I guess acoustic music, was actually being able to hear the song. The idea that the song had room to breathe, and I could actually get into what you might call the subtleties of the song.
Yeah. What about you, Rowan? Do you get into the message of the music?
Yeah, we're both songwriters, and a lot of the music I've listened to has, lyrics have been an important aspect of it, as well as the music. So, because we're both songwriters, we're kind of focused on the storytelling aspect of it. John's the more prolific songwriter, and will generally write starting from a lyric. Although you might take a bit of music as a kind of starting point to get a lyric, but to kind of get the overall structure of the song, it would be the lyric usually, and then the music would be worked in around that. Although there are exceptions as well, where I might have written something that's just a piece of music on the guitar or something, and then, I don't know what to do with this. And then John will say, I know what to do. Let's make a song. And then he'll get a lyric off the back of that. And that's on occasion. None of the songs on this particular album are examples of that, but there's a few examples where we've collaborated in that way. So there's different ways, but quite often it's the lyric is the starting point. So it's a pretty important aspect of our music.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I still see it very much as a collaboration. Sorry, Greg. Like, two examples come to mind. One is a song that wasn't on the album, but is on our Bandcamp page, called Refuge. And Rowan came around to my place with this guitar riff, and I just thought it was an absolutely hypnotic guitar riff. It was one of those riffs. It's one of those riffs a bit like, say, the riff for Satisfaction, or the riff for maybe the riff for Layla. It's one of those riffs that just is an earworm. It just sticks in your mind. And I thought, well, I've got to write the best lyric I can to that. I felt really challenged. And that was how Refuge happened. On the other hand, one song that is on the album, Hope You're Okay, was largely my lyric, but Rowan had quite a bit of input into it. And what had happened, without going into details, I'd had a pretty shocking day in my personal life, and I was just feeling terrible. And I got in the car and just drove out into the country. And on my way back, this little snatch of melody came into my head. And at the time, I was in a very quite negative mood. So I was singing to myself, I hope that you're okay, because I'm not fine. And Rowan heard that and said, why don't you make it, I hope that you're okay, hope I'll be fine, which totally changed the feeling in the song, but I think changed it for the better.
And I hope I'm not too clear in this short time. Yeah, I hope that you're okay, hope I'll be fine.
You had been performing as the Keynes Brothers. Is that how you pronounce it? Keynes?
Yeah, or the Keynes Brothers.
Keynes?
Yep.
Yeah, we were never quite sure, to tell you the truth.
So why the transition to Faces in the Street?
Well, there were a few things about it, but there were one or two events that kind of really triggered it with me. The first was, you'd be amazed at the amount of times we got asked after a gig if we really were brothers. And because I was the singer, people tended to come up to me, and I frankly just got sick of answering the question. But the other kind of more significant thing was our previous EP, which is also on Bandcamp, called Blue Wolves Turning. I was going around to radio stations, community radio stations, trying to get people to play it. And in the end, a few people did, which is nice. But in the process, I got talking to one radio announcer who ran an economics program. She heard we were called the Keynes Brothers, and she straight away wanted to interview me about the technicalities of deficit financing, about which I know very little. And I just thought, well, the first thing I thought was, no, I can't get into that discussion. I want to stick to what I actually understand.
Yeah.
But the other, it just really got me thinking about the name. And I've always, we've always loved that poem, Faces in the Street, by Henry Lawson. So it just kind of flowed from that.
Yeah, as economic theorists, we make good songwriters.
Absolutely.
It was produced by Cameron Mackenzie, who works with Mark Seymour. What did Cameron bring to the project?
Again, it's a question of where do you start? Working with Cameron was a real pleasure. Like, in the past, we've worked with engineers, and in particular Craig Newman, who engineered quite a few of our previous recordings, and that was a great collaboration. But there is a difference, as you know, between working with an engineer and working with a producer. And I'll admit to being a little bit nervous, and that lasted until I think about the first half hour of the first meeting we had with Cam before we even actually started recording. What Cam brought to it was, I think, a really, really good ear for what would work as a recording and what wouldn't. And I found myself getting more and more comfortable with Cam's input as the process went on. I really appreciated it. What do you reckon?
We had a lot of ideas that perhaps we hadn't thought of. So it was great to work with a producer who would, want to actively have some input into how we're going to do the songs. And he was quite pleased with how well prepared we were. We turned up, we already had arrangements. We already had a fairly clear idea of how we wanted to get the song to sound. It was just about, I guess, brokering that his vision as the producer as to how he thought it would sound best, and our own ideas beforehand. So a bit of a processing getting to that point. But I think we may have succeeded, hopefully, at least with some of the songs there. And he's added stuff like he pulled out the cello and dropped a bit of cello onto certain tracks and so on, and hopefully the result was better than average with a bit of luck.
So how did Cam mic the guitars and the mandolin? Did he experiment with that? Because he got a great sound.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, I had my parts worked out as the mandolin player prior to starting recording. He had a bit of input into how I could, tailor what I was doing a bit, and then it just became apparent where the cello might come in, and then we had another vocalist come in to do a bit of extra harmony in a couple of the songs as well, and that was a great element to put into it, just to offset the monotony factor. If it's just us the whole way through the whole album, it's nice to have things featuring like cello and additional vocals. So yeah, we had a fairly clear idea of what we were doing before we came in, and we just had to fine tune that. And Cam obviously had a few things to say about how we might succeed in putting that together.
Yeah.
And I'd add, we were really lucky to get Kath Rutten for that couple of songs, like great voice and very professional in the studio.
It's a strange, strange world we live in.
Tell me about your instruments. What are they, and how did you acquire them?
You want to say?
So my main guitar is a Maton Dreadnought. It's an EM325 from memory, and I bought it back in 1998. And it's still my main instrument. I've got a few other guitars, but it's still my favourite guitar. And it's like a lot of Matons of that era. It's just solid as a rock. Big sound. It stays in tune. It doesn't cause trouble. And and Rowan.
Yeah, I'm a mandolin player. I do play a bit of guitar as well. The guitar that I'm playing throughout the album is a 12-string. It's a Timber Ridge. I bought it in Melbourne. It's a decent workhorse guitar. I quite like the sound of it. The mandolin is a Eastman, which I also bought in Melbourne. And as I continue to play it, the sound improves. It's a little bit like a violin. The more you play it, the more you get a sweeter sound. And so that's the story behind that. We're just a couple of guys from Melbourne trying to make some decent music with a bit of luck, and we actually had the opportunity to do this album. So hopefully it goes somewhere.
So 10 tracks on the album. Were there others that you were tinkering with that didn't make the cut?
Yeah, we recorded 12 in the hope that we might get them all to fly. And so, some songs worked better than others. And we've got quite a back catalogue of other songs as well. So there were certainly songs that we were hoping to get into the album, but obviously there's got to be a certain number of songs. So 10 was a pretty decent number, I suppose, and I think we managed to get a reasonably consistent, end result with those 10 songs.
Yeah. So the album's out March 21. Have you got some launch gigs planned?
At the moment, we've got one launch gig lined up, and that's not till the 26th of April. That's at the Merry Bar. And we do also have a substitute bass player lined up for that gig, so we'll be playing that gig as a 3-piece. There's the possibility of a gig in country Victoria coming up before then, but I don't want to preempt the venue, so I'm not even going to name the town or the venue at the moment. You know, it will be publicising it if and when we get it, and I certainly hope we do. And but we do want to get back into playing in front of audiences quite soon. So this week we're going along and just doing an open mic at the Thornbury Local, and that's basically just to get back into it. And also, there's a discipline in an open mic. You get a 15-minute slot, 3 songs. You know, you've got to get on, be in tune, be sound checked, play your 3 songs, get off. That compressed time frame is actually quite good for, you know, preparing yourself for bigger and better things, I guess. Yeah. Or bigger things anyway.
So what do you hope people get out of listening to the album?
Good question. I think songs are often a great opportunity to talk about stuff that's not so easy to talk about, you know, in regular life. So the hope is that when there's a particular song, particular story being told through that song, people connect with that and go, yeah, I can relate. And it's just a way to connect with people. It's fantastic to be able to go and play a gig and play your own material, and people listen and really appreciate, or hopefully really appreciate what you're doing. And that's just fantastic when you succeed. So that's the challenge, is to communicate. So it's definitely a great forum, songwriting and doing your own stuff to people live. It's just that opportunity to, you know, connect in that way with people.
Yeah, I think it is about connection. It's about communication, but it's a different kind of communication from what you do with just words or with just music. It's emotional. It's emotional and intellectual at the same time. You can say some quite intense things and often some quite revealing things without giving away anything about your actual life. And you can say things that you wouldn't say at a party, you know, just like Rowan was saying, you know, some things you wouldn't normally say. You can say some things you definitely wouldn't say at a party, or certainly not, certainly not in the workplace or in any kind of casual social situation. And hopefully what people get out of it is of help to them.
Yeah.
That's what I really hope. If somebody hears something in one of our songs and thinks that really means something to me, and it doesn't have to be for any reason that relates to what we were actually writing about, that's great. To me, that's a bigger ambition than, you know, going viral on the internet or conventional success, if you like.
Yeah.
Hopefully to help to people.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, Faces in the Street is the name of the band. It's out March 21. It's been great to chat, and you should be proud of your work.
Oh, thanks kindly,
Thanks
Greg.
very much, Greg. Yeah.